So, yes, thank you for this good introduction. And actually, you said it all. Let's see if it's a new instrument. It's a sort of pilot project, isn't it? It's something new. The idea it was really to have to be able to not do just research for research, or that the research is not linked to policy, or that we duplicate things that happen already. So the idea is that Bruno is leading the research side. He will now take the floor to explain you what we call the red line document and the state of where we are now. And the purpose of the discussions afterwards is for the stakeholders to give really their view on this. For once, let's say, if we can put it like this, we will first go with what you think as stakeholders of this research topic and the aspects and the research questions. So we really try to tailor whatever Bruno and Giuseppe will do afterwards, how they will tailor it so that at the end of the process, it can directly feed policy making. So in order to do that, we have this series of workshops. This is the first one. Then we will be having a second one with the researchers. They will go through the same procedure and discuss the red line document. And we will have a third workshop with policymakers as well. At the end, the idea is to have a final workshop where we present all the summaries of the previous ones, put together, synthesized in a final red line document that we plan to make it useful and used by policymakers. That will be our objective. So Bruno, I give you now the floor so you can really go in depth and tell us more about the concept and the content. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. Okay. Yes, thanks, Natalie, for the great introduction. You already covered actually the most important points. I guess that you all received already the red line document. Let me explain what is the idea behind this document. So the idea was to provide a brief summary of the state of the art from a researcher point of view, because of course I'm a researcher. So we tried together with Giuseppe Gabrielli to summarize the available evidence till date on the topic of loneliness and isolation. And this document should provide the background for the next workshops. So we ask everybody to read this document and reflect on what is missing, as Natalie was saying, and what other actors, stakeholders, policymakers would like to see in this document. So what kind of questions are missing, what kind of research question we should ask that are not covered in the document and can be useful for stakeholders and policymakers. I will not go through the whole document, but I will very briefly summarize the key points here. So we all know that older individuals are the most vulnerable to the health consequences of the pandemic, because the risk of death and hospitalization, of course, increases with age. However, it has not been recognized sufficiently the heterogeneity in this risk. So older people have often been depicted as a kind of homogeneous group, but we also know that key heterogeneities also exist. For example, risk of death and serious health consequences from the COVID are linked with previous health conditions. This topic is related to increased ages because, as I was saying, older people were depicted as frail and as an homogeneous group, and sometimes restrictions were imposed or encouraged, especially for older people. So older people were especially encouraged to stay home, to keep away from social relationships, and to isolate from family and friends. So this might have increased risk of social isolation and loneliness among older people. So this is the main topic of the red line document and of the knowledge sharing process, but this of course is strictly interconnected with ages, as I was saying, but also with other aspects like caregiving. So we know that because of the restrictions, because of also fear of contagion, organizing caregiving was very difficult during the pandemic, and is still difficult. So this has increased stress for caregivers, but also for individuals that receive care. And it might also have impacted on the availability of care to older people. So this again might have increased even more psychological well-being issues among older people. In the red light document, we summarize the state of the art. As I said, several studies actually suggest that younger adults, actually, and not older adults, were mostly affected in terms of psychological well-being by the COVID pandemic. So overall, older adults have been more resilient to the pandemic. In part, it could be due to the fact that older people might be more accustomed to restricted relationship, and they might have a lower social network also before the pandemic. But it may also be related to the pre-COVID already higher level of issues in psychological well-being among older people. Well, despite the fact that overall older people seem to be more resilient than other groups of the population, there is still the question of whether psychological well-being decreased, and in particular whether feeling of loneliness increased for older people during the pandemic. And the existing evidence here is mixed, with some studies finding increased feeling of loneliness, but other studies did not find the same result. And probably here we need to do more research to highlight the heterogeneity, as I was saying, among the older people. So not all parts of the population, not all older people are suffering in the same way from the direct and indirect consequences of the pandemic. So these heterogeneities should be explored in much more detail. So here the goal of the knowledge sharing process. So not only we need more research and we need more empirical evidence on the topic of social isolation and loneliness, but we also want to bring together researchers, stakeholders, and policymakers in order to examine what has been done in order to react to the pandemic and to limit the negative effects of the pandemic. So we want to see stakeholders and policymakers what have to say in terms of what has been done in terms of the best practices in order to reduce the risk of isolation, in order to rethink care, formal and informal caregiving. Well, the key question we want to answer is whether the impact of the pandemic has been different across different areas, different countries, different regions, but also across different socioeconomic groups of the population, and what factor might explain this heterogeneity. In particular, differences across countries and regions, even municipalities, might be very informative in order to understand what kind of policies, what kind of measures have been mostly effective. So we want to understand what lesson can be learned from the experiences in the field, and to what extent researchers can contribute to to quantify, let's say, the effectiveness of the different measure, and we believe that this knowledge sharing process at the end will provide hopefully useful information to be better prepared for eventual next future pandemics. Well, in terms of organization, Natalie already said that we are thinking to organize 3 workshops. So this is the first workshop. Each workshop will be focused on a specific group of actors. So this one is focused on the voice of the stakeholders. The next one is focused on the researchers and then policymakers. Each workshop will produce some small written contribution that will serve to build the reflection for the next steps. And at the end, the final goal will be to produce a document that summarizes all the inputs from the different actors, and, as I was saying, hopefully provides some practical guidelines for action. Thank you very much.